Thank you so much for having us here today. We're going to be talking about using automation to build a sustainable food safety culture and consistent hygiene SOPs across your organization. So, Paul, let's get underway. Talk to me about the importance of building a good food safety culture.
A food safety culture for all your staff, all your people, your business, and mainly for your customers and the products you produce is really a pinnacle device that you need to have that really takes you to another level. Obviously, we have food safety programs, we have GMPs and SSOPs and so forth and so on, and we have documents and procedures that guide people through. But really one of the things that's at the heart of all this is when you create that culture, and you need that culture to really focus people on understanding really what we call the why. And why do we want to create that culture is so that everybody understands their purpose behind it, understanding exactly what they bring to that, to food safety. And it really starts with that culture, and everybody's got to be on the same playing field. One of the things I've said for many years is really when you create that culture, it doesn't matter if you're a frontline worker or you're the CEO of the company. When it comes to this culture, everybody is on a flat line. So everybody's on that flat line of leadership so they can focus on that and make sure that they achieve the goals of the company. And ultimate safety comes along with that, and producing quality products along with that as well.
Absolutely. Paul, what resources does MereTech offer to help people who are looking to build out their food safety culture?
MereTech has a lot of different assets. First and foremost, we have an entire crew of trained professionals in regards to basically human hygiene. What do you deal with inside a plant? But also available to you is also we have what is called a hygiene toolbox. This hygiene toolbox has 6 different modules that kind of walk you through the real basics of employee hygiene, but talk about first and foremost is what we're talking about today is culture. How do you develop the culture? One of those things is really a hygiene social contract. That's really lays out clearly, and it's also something you can modify that can be specific to your facility. That's one. Then we talk about hand hygiene. Then we talk about footwear hygiene. How do you lay out a hygiene zone correctly that will give you the best in both consistency and efficacy and compliance? Okay. Then you kind of really, one of the big pieces out there is like that validation. What do you have for validation? Well, we give you tools to help with that validation process, not only for the number of events, but also how do you validate the automated technology, how do you validate manual hand washing? And then really the last part of that is really carrying you back into that, really tells you how to kind of stamp and repeat. How do you deal with that again and again? Training is a huge piece of food safety. Every time when you get hired on a company, either you're a new hire, you're a temporary, you're using contract labor. The first and foremost training has to be on food safety. Has to be on what do you do for hygiene training? How do you get into the plant? How do you do your job? And these are really critical aspects, especially in these times that can be easily missed, and we can't afford that. That puts too many other people at risk. And so that's a real key aspect. So those are some of the assets that we have to help them develop their programs or to refine their programs.
And where can people access this library of resources?
We have that directly, not only with the knowledge base within our team of people, both within our sales staff, as well as then our service engineers in the field, as well as then it's available for all download directly on our website.
So let's talk a little bit about consistency as it relates to hygiene SOPs. So hygiene is an important component of a good, robust food safety culture. Why is it so important to have consistency in hygiene SOPs across the organization?
The challenge with when you don't have consistency is really creating, again, that culture. It's a little bit hit or miss in the processes you go through. Sometimes it's enforced and sometimes it's not enforced. And when you look at hygiene, it's a black and white. There's no gray to it. And so you have to have that. And you start with that culture and you have the procedures behind it, but you really have to make sure that hygiene aspect and that consistency is done the same across the board. So everything from, how is my facility laid out to how am I onboarding and training that individual to come into that facility, the processes that they go through, the directionality of people once they leave a hygiene zone or something like, all that has to be orchestrated a little bit in advance to make sure that it works well for the organization, works well for the hygiene of the people, that you're not running into, physical challenges. One of the things we talk about the most when we talk about creating consistency, that is something that we call the 3 Ps. The people, the place, and the products. Once you understand these, not only can you create hygienic areas, you can create process and control behind it, but you understand the people, the place, and the products. Now you understand how do we build that culture within that food safety.
Excellent. So in conjunction with consistency really is standardization, having a standard in every process to follow, to make it simple, easy, and executable by all employees.
Absolutely. So one of the challenges is getting people doing the same thing over and over again and doing it the same way over and over again. And am I washing hands correctly? And one of those things is it's the human behavioral piece. And if you're dealing with the human behavior piece, every time we wash our hands manually, we're going to do it differently. Every time we sanitize our footwear, we're going to be doing it a little bit differently, depending on how that process is. So by automating that process, and that's the beauty of automation, is you're really getting to you're doing the same thing the right way every single time. That's where MereTech comes into play in helping out create those processes, developing and selling automated hand washing systems to be able to help solve that human issue so it does become consistent. Everybody is doing the same exact thing every single time.
Absolutely. It reminds me of an acronym that I know we've discussed in the past pertaining to consistency, which is the SAVE acronym. SAVE standing for standardize, automate, validate, and educate, which I think might be helpful for the attendees today as just a small takeaway to really drive a possible process for developing consistency, keeping that in mind.
100% agree, because one of the challenges is, if you have a manual process, it's really hard to validate. And one of the things we talk to a lot of plants, and this as well, is that, how do you know that you're getting the compliance you need? How are you getting that consistency that you need? Well, you can only do it one way, and that's police that behavior. Yeah. That's really challenging in today's times, especially with, shortage of staff. Yep. People are working longer, harder hours. You really need to automate these things to be able to get control in it, and then you can automate something that has that consistency. You cannot build quality without consistency. They're Absolutely. Inseparable.
So we're going to go through a demonstration of the CleanTech automated hand washing systems today, but these hand washing systems are a great way to build this culture around consistency through hygiene SOPs. Because the technology is standardized, because it's clinically backed, and because it guarantees an effective wash from every person
Yep.
to person, whether it's a temp worker, seasonal workers, a very easy, straightforward process that everyone can use to ensure effective hygiene, reduction in potential pathogens in the facility, and controlling contamination.
Absolutely agree. So, Alison, one of the things that we talk about often is really what are the challenges when you have maybe a company that has multiple locations, or within an operation or a plant they actually do different things. How do you go about that? How do you deal with those challenges, especially when it comes to hygiene of the staff?
Absolutely. So really, as a carry-on to what you talked about, Paul, having a robust food safety culture that exists at all levels, starts with leadership and really is reinforced within each department. It's the responsibility of those departments to look at their processes and where there are deviations, inconsistencies, and really develop ways to standardize and drive consistency amongst their process. Specifically for hygiene, it's difficult enough just to get consistency from person to person within an individual facility, let alone when you're considering organizations who are manufacturing high care products at multiple locations, maybe across the US or even globally. There can be a lot of opportunity for inconsistency from site to site, from person to person. So finding technology, developing process to really help standardize and create procedures that are easy to follow for staff easy to onboard, easy to train for, is going to help reinforce and drive that consistency and ultimately that food safety culture throughout the company as a whole.
Absolutely, and I think one of the bigger challenges, and I think you would agree, is, especially when you have a multi-layered facility or multiple facilities, obviously every building's a little different.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that trying to get everybody to kind of do that same thing, or you even have staff, even leadership moves from plant to plant a little bit. And so by developing that consistent culture across their entire spectrum of plants really helps for that transitionary period, helps to make sure that everybody understands what those consistent goals need to be.
Absolutely. Each plant will have their own unique needs, but MereTech can help with this. Our team of hygiene experts can come in, evaluate the needs of an individual facility, take a look at the hygiene zone, the flow of employees, and provide recommendations for the best consistent practices. And that can include utilizing our automated hand washing or footwear sanitizing systems to give a standard clinically backed means for each employee to have effective hygiene going into high care production areas or any other critical egress points.
Yeah, excellent point. Even those plants that do things like I'm dealing with raw or cooked,
Right.
That's an intervention step that we teach often within our both education processes and teachings that we do, as well as in our site surveys. Look for those pitfalls. Though a lot of these things are known by our experts that are these food safety sanitarians that are basically in these plants, these QA quality directors and so forth that are in process, or even the HR people there for that onboarding. They bring these things to light, but sometimes it just takes a little bit of momentum to kind of get them to that next level. It's like, all right, we got to step this up, or we got to do something different, or we can improve. We always look at it as that. Yeah, we want to look at a process improvement. It's like 5S for food hygiene for professionals for people.
Mm-hmm.
Is really what a commonality is. You're really wanting to create that within your organization.
And promote it. Once you do establish those best practices, it's the responsibility of leadership in all departments to promote those across facilities, share that information so that everybody can harmonize to the best practices as a company.
Yeah, that's that flat line of leadership within that food safety culture. That's what's really important. The hygiene social contracts are really good, creating that culture, but also, it ties back to a lot of companies have these food safety committees. It goes right in line with that. That's really important.
Absolutely. And we at MereTech have had a lot of success with corporate partnerships. And what we typically see is that those corporate partnerships do start with a commitment from the leadership, that they have looked at the process and identified certain gaps that have areas for improvement. For employee hygiene, those gaps can be anything from ineffective practices or employee compliance. It might be inefficiencies that they see in the process, or even just a desire to improve for audit readiness.
Yeah.
And so once we have commitment from leadership, typically what we'll see is then that they engage department heads. So to your point about having a food safety committee, also once corporate leaders determine that they do want to evolve and improve hygiene practices, they will get food safety, quality, facilities, sanitation all involved so that they can understand the desired change in process and work alongside MereTech to really put together a plan for the best process to improve. Sometimes that might include starting with just an individual location so that one site can get comfortable with this change in process, understand what it takes for installation, and also get employees using a new process that's more consistent and get them excited about it. Once that first facility is excited and ready to go, then it's kind of like wildfire, right? I mean, then it's about driving that message to all the other facilities, which may include the adoption and a changed SOP.
That's always a challenge for plants, isn't it?
It is.
Because, one of the things that we see, especially on, we see it on our healthcare side of the business, but you see that reluctance because, writing a procedure, making a change in procedure can somewhat be a daunting process. And that's one of the advantages of the toolbox that we have is that that work is already done. That's a free downloadable that really helps them guide through that process, not only a manual, but in an automated process, so that it feels as if here's an example and a sample that you can use to really bake into those hard documents we require. Not only do professionals require it because the companies want it, not only do third-party auditors want to see that, obviously regulatory wants to see that.
Mm-hmm.
So again, it's another process to help improve that, to just make that transition and that training easier.
Earlier I talked about the SAVE acronym for standardization, automation, validation, and educate. So Paul, we've already talked a lot about standardization and automating, especially employee hygiene with MereTech systems. But how specifically can companies look at doing validation when they want to put a new employee hygiene SOP in place?
That's a great point. That's a really, some people may overthink that and it's a little challenging, but it's really not. So one is, we know that's a requirement. Not only do you want to have that for your own peace of mind, but you're going to get asked that by regulatory or third-party auditors, or even if you're making goods for someone else, they may want to do that. That's a really good point. So and it's easy. It's not complicated. So we have the over 50 different studies of the efficacy that MereTech has performed over the 30 years of challenging against true pathogens with an FDA-certified laboratory to an ASTM standard. So not only do they have that within their budget, then they also have what is called a calibration certificate from MereTech. MereTech, service engineer has come in, we have validated our technology is operating exactly like those studies were set up and done and performed. So we have that. But then we also have, and it also available within the toolbox, is ways to validate on your own. So again, giving you peace of mind. We've developed a process alongside Hygiena of using an ATP test system, the Hygiena system, that measures adenosine triphosphate to be able to really measure what is my basically ROU before and post hygiene event, so you really can collect data, show that you're getting the reductions, show that you're putting people in the right place so that you do have that peace of mind. And that's, I think, a really valuable tool for people to do, is look at exactly that. We actually have a download that they can do, an entire procedure that walks them through the steps that helps them really close that loop in that. So yeah, validation is really important. I mean, every business does it. They want to make sure that they're doing it the right way, to make sure that it's vetted in true science. The challenge with that is, it's not like when you deal with, a hard surface. That's a real challenge. It's either, that is black or white. Unfortunately, with skin and it having living flora of it that has a certain microbial load, you have to look at that in a little bit of that gray. And so that's why using the ATP, following that process measure, using these three pieces that really tie that together to close that loop. And yes, we have a standard, we have a process, and now we have a validation of it.
Absolutely. And then once the validation has taken place, it's important to educate, right? So making sure that that message is filtered down to employees, that if a new process is put in place, that it's important for employees to understand why that is, so they can really get on board and understanding the benefits of this new standardized automated process that's been validated.
Yeah.
And constant education, always reinforcing, especially with new employees, having good training programs, having appropriate signage, all to help direct and guide them in using the process the right way for ultimate standardization and consistency.
I think one of the things that we've done as a company that really helps is, you can hang a lot of posters with a lot of words. It doesn't help. The more visual, the better.
Mm-hmm.
It really helps guide you through that process, especially when you're dealing with a diverse culture in multiple languages. Yeah. So the less in the written word, the more pictorial you're able to get that. But education doesn't always have to be about that. There's mm-hmm. multiple ways to educate without actually really, sitting down and teaching a class. As most of us think about it as education. Sure. I'm learning something. I'm sitting down and learning something. Actually, one of the things we offer, and you get to lead a lot of these, which is, I think, a lot of fun, is some of these food safety, little call, lunch and learns, we call them a little bit, where you get to come in.
Yeah.
We have demonstration equipment if they don't have the equipment already, or you talk more about the importance of hand hygiene. We make it fun with, I think one of them is hand hygiene bingo or something like that.
Absolutely. Yeah,
So-
we've done hand hygiene bingo. We've participated in hygiene days or safety days to educate on the connection between employee hygiene, specifically hand washing, and employee health and safety. But absolutely, you can make it a lot of fun. Just invite employees to engage and learn something, and maybe get rewarded with some fun prizes as part of those programs.
Well, they feel valued.
Absolutely.
And they get to, in kind of like a non-confrontational way, really ask questions. It's really important because that's one of the things that helps create that culture. People cannot discount that aspect of culture. It really is at the center of what we do. As long as there's a really good high quality culture, you're going to have really compliance. You're going to be able to meet the standards that you expect, may even get greater output. And biggest thing right now is I may retain more staff, and we need
Very
retention of
important.
employees right now.
Absolutely.
So Alison, earlier we were talking about the challenges it is with you have an operation that has multiple facilities or different processes in a facility. Can you really give us a story about one of those?
Sure, absolutely. One example that comes to mind was a ready-to-eat food processing environment that came to us with questions surrounding footwear sanitizing. They didn't have robust practices in place at the moment. There were concerns about contamination. They didn't have captive footwear, so employees were coming in street shoes, and really it was an opportunity for us to work with them, consult, and provide recommendations to improve their practices around footwear that ultimately led into improvements for hand washing as well. So through site surveys, we established what those recommendations were and put systems in place in one of their key manufacturing facilities for evaluation, really to get everybody on board. So employees got to use it, they got that valuable feedback, and also they were able to test and verify that this technology was going to improve their process. From there, then there was, really corporate adoption. They wrote SOPs that included the MereTech systems for use in their facilities, and this is an ongoing partnership that we're evolving. Paul, you also worked closely with me on this opportunity, and I'd love to kind of pose the question back to you. What were some of the areas that stand out in your mind where we got involved in this particular relationship to really help construct a more consistent process for them?
Oh, excellent. One of the things that first and foremost was really we created a partnership between the two organizations to really understand what the challenges are. So it's really doing it in the best of ways where you understand exactly, okay, what are my challenges? Am I having micro hits? So really the first thing we did when we looked at this facility is, again, we put into play our 3 Ps, the people, the place, and the products, to really understand exactly the challenges down to the nitty gritty. It was a tight facility, a high throughput zone, tight area. We were getting micro counts where we shouldn't be getting micro counts. All these things had to be looked at to exactly how do you develop that program. One of the programs we have, we call 12 seconds clean.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and it just doesn't focus just on hand washing, but footwear at the same time in that 12 seconds. Great advantages of that, call it 2 birds in 1 stone. No one wants to do that, but you really want to accomplish those tasks at the same time, create that process control that has to go back with that consistency, and having everybody do that same thing over and over again. So that's one of those things that you want to look at of how do we develop those programs. Yeah, it's a great opportunity when we get to work with customers to be able to sit there and say, what are your challenges? How can we help you? Mm-hmm. And this is one of those success stories that we were able to say, yeah, that's a feather in our cap. We were able to come in, help identify work in line with them. We made a proposal of exactly what we thought was best practices. We wanted to give it a validation to make sure that this is going to work. Every plant is different. If there's one thing I've learned in the last 29 years in this industry, every single manufacturing plant is a little different. Their process is a little different. What they handle is a little different. The people are a little different. That's one of those things you have to really focus on to create not only that consistency, but that way then you can just push right into that culture. And that really changes the game for all the people.
Absolutely. And despite differences from plant to plant. As long as there is a sharing of best practices, they can continue to construct and build that food safety culture at a very high level corporately.
Absolutely. Even internationally, we've seen with this organization. Not only can you do it domestically, but you can do it also internationally, to where you can kind of make sure that everybody is operating in that same way. Again, it goes back to an old adage: with inconsistency, you can build quality. You can always make sure that it doesn't matter where it's at, it doesn't matter where it's made in the world. You know it's being done the same way.
Absolutely.
And that's something that you can bank on. So Alison, now that we've talked to them about CleanTech systems and so forth, and automation and culture and so forth, do we want to go ahead and give them a demonstration? You just wash your hands.
Yeah, let's do it.
Let's go for it. All right, so what Alison is going to do is she's going to go ahead and wash her hands. First thing she's going to do is she's going to put them straight into the hand washer, washing and sanitizing. The whole thing takes 12 seconds. First second or so is washing the hands with bottled water. That's to remove the big bugs and so forth from the hand. Then we're going to wash with antimicrobial soap for 6 seconds, spinning around the hand. Then we're going to give a potable water rinse. That last 5 seconds, that's the entire process. Every hand wash is identical for every single user. So how was it?
Amazing.
Fantastic.
So easy.
So now that we're going to kind of talk about really what happened during that automated hand wash. So during that hand wash, when she first blocked it, actually the cylinder turned on. There's actually 40 nozzles in there that are actually washing and sanitizing your hand, 20 per hand. There's 8 around the wrist. There's another 8 in a helical pattern, and 4 critical nozzles that are dedicated directly to your fingertips, between your fingers, and under your fingernails. This is really the business part of the hand that we really need to wash. Okay. Then it kicks in after that 1 second potable water rinse. We kick into the washing and sanitizing cycle that's really 6 seconds. What that does is it mixes the antimicrobial soap with the water, and you're really washing that hand as that turns around those 23 times with all those nozzles. Then really that second 7 in the cycle, it switches to a potable water rinse. That's really where we're rinsing away all these big pathogens, so forth, anything that died. And then she's done. She flicks her fingers a couple times, pulls them out. We dry the hands directly. We always recommend a paper towel dry for a couple reasons. One, it's more hygienic. It's faster process to get people through. You're able to have less cross-contamination is what we've noticed over the years of doing hand hygiene. And so really when you look at that best practices, that's what we recommend. We know it's a personal choice. A lot of plants choose differently. But again, it depends on what you're doing. You know, if you're a gloved operation, we don't always recommend from a hygiene aspect to use an air dryer because of just the time it takes, the difficulty of getting gloves on. So there's lots of reasons why you choose what drying apparatus you need, because sometimes it's decided by what is it we're doing with our staff, sometimes it's by facility choice, so forth and so on. So now that we talked exactly about what happened during the hygiene event, I think one of the things that we need to probably describe is really what happens for footwear sanitizing. And so MereTech has a couple different options. One, we have one that is really for wetted environments, one that's more replacing your traditional foot bath mats, and then one that's designed for drier environments, or those what we call low moisture. And so they work in 2 different ways. That's really critical because these are 2 different types of departments or areas that are dealt with. So wet plants is exactly that. So it's a pan sitting in front of the CleanTech system, and it's sitting there with a quat bath solution, basically 800 to 1,000 parts per million. It's not like your traditional doormat. You got to go replenish and take people to do that and mix it the right ratio. This is actually automated, so it's all taken care of by this CleanTech system, mixing that 800 to 1,000 parts per million to get to that sanitation level recommended by the USDA and FDA to that level. So that's really critical. So that's all automated by the system, and it's constantly replenishing itself, and it knows exactly what it needs to do. So it's using chemicals designed directly in the system, does that, it's easily cleaned. You can do it as either CIP or COP, so it doesn't have to worry about that. So then you have that low moisture, and this is a real challenging one in the industry. It's difficult to deal with because you have facilities that want to stay dry, but we want to clean, but they don't want the mess of dry quat. They know tacky mats are really getting rid of the lints and the soils, but not getting rid of the pathogens. So how do you deal with that? Well, we have what is called the Soul Clean system. And the Soul Clean system uses what is called Seneffect D2. It is an alcohol quat combination chemical that really is a ready-to-use product. It sprays it onto a mat that's absorbable, like a little bit like a sponge, that when you step on it, it allows it to get the sole of that shoe damp, but not like you're in a bath. And that allows you to kind of get that sole sanitized. You have that 12 seconds contact time with both the wetted and the sole clean version, which is critical. Sanitizers need time to work. So this allows them to do that. And then what you do is once you're done washing your hands, you go through your normal apparatus, you step out, usually with the sole clean or even the other in the wetted, you have maybe some walk-off mats so you're not tracking those pathogens. That way then it has an opportunity to dry. The SanEffect D2 will typically dry in about 20 seconds. And that's a real advantage that for those wetter or those non-wet environments, so dry environments, allowing that to dry before you're getting into those areas that you want to keep dry. So there's really two really viable options to help the plants. Did I leave anything out there, Alison?
No, I just think, as a whole, Paul, that regardless of, what the best fit is for an individual facility, this is all about, driving away from inefficiencies and, really inconsistency in process from person to person. One of the things that I always mention, having gone through a lot of different plants, is, witnessing what happens with traditional manual practices. For hand washing, we see a lot of what we call the splash and dash. People just not remaining compliant to what companies have outlined for the standards for hand washing, be it 20 seconds or longer. Often we'll see people, spending 4 or 5 seconds, which I think is really representative of traditional human behavior.
Yeah, 95% of people don't wash their hands correctly when they do it manually. And we're seeing a drop in that still, these post-COVID times, people are kind of sliding back into their old ways, and that's a behavioral challenge. It's something that is very difficult to change. That's why automation comes in. It really kind of creates that standard and expectation. I think we had a customer a while back really clearly say, he goes, the training for this is simple. Put your hands in, leave it in till the water stops. When you're done, pull them out. That's it. And I think that was his entire, training method. And he goes, it's the easiest training I've done on hygiene in years.
Love it.
So Alison, we've talked a lot about hygiene today. We talked a lot about different things. But do you think we've covered everything?
Absolutely. I think, especially going back to the SAVE acronym, we talked about standardization. We talked about automation and the improvements that can be gained through MereTech systems for hand washing and footwear sanitizing. We talked about validation of new automated practices as a best process, and also education. Yeah. Education at all levels within the organization. And really, I think that summarizes how you can help build a robust food safety culture.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, because that's what it's all about. It's all about creating that culture, understanding exactly what your challenges are, which is really about your 3 Ps. So once you put these three things together, you've got your hygiene culture, you get your SAVE, which is incredibly important that people need to think about, and then you understand your 3 Ps, you can create a food safety program that really will exceed expectations.
Absolutely. And definitely want to thank everybody for joining us today. We've enjoyed sharing this time with you. And we're going to open the floor now to some questions and answers.
Fantastic.